So I recently finished reading a book, and that book is Hour of the Star by Clarice Lispector. This is actually Lispector's final novel. It's the last novel that she wrote before she passed away, and it's a very short story, but it's an interesting story. It's a story that has a lot of depth, has a lot of layers, and I think that's what you can definitely expect if you read any of Lispector's writing. So Hour of the Star is a story within a story. It follows our narrator, who is a writer named Rodrigo SM, and he's telling us a story about a young and impoverished girl living in the slums of Rio. Her name is Macabea. And in this story, we get to see Macabea's life, we get to learn about her as a character, and the way Rodrigo writes about her is very honest, but also very harsh and very cruel. Macabea is a character that, despite everything, she still manages to live a happy life. There's a lot of themes that's laminated into the story. Themes of like poverty and social class and love and identity and the art of writing itself. On the narrator side, on Rodrigo's side, he tells us the story, but there's also moments where he's kind of introspective. He's talking about his writing process and how he feels writing the story and what that does for him. And then on the flip side, you have Macabea, who is a young woman who's also just trying to discover herself and figure herself out. Macabea is somebody who never really sees herself in any capacity. And throughout this work, like from start to finish, you start to see the little ways in which she tries to take up space. I wanted to curate books in the month of April that really explores the themes of identity in so many different ways. And I think Hour of the Star does that really well, not just from the perspective of Macabea, like I said, but also of the writer who's narrating the story of Rodrigo. And another thing that I really found interesting about this work is how innocence is so villainized in the story, because innocence is the thing that surrounds Macabea in her actions and the way she speaks and how she like exists. Because it's treated so cruelly in this work, it actually makes the story of Macabea quite haunting. The way I annotated this book was like a journal entry. I had questions in here. I was underlining so many quotes. For me, I found that Rodrigo and Macabea were two sides of the same coin, two different kind of characters trying to figure out their identity and their power. And I do feel like power does play a role in this work a lot, especially when you can see how just having a slight upper hand can give you so much more advantage than the other person. So the power dynamics in this is very interesting, and I definitely see that power dynamic played out between the narrator and the character that he's writing about. Either way, this is my little review of Hour of the Star by Clarice Lispector. I will say, I think when it comes to Clarice Lispector, I think you either get her writing and you are into that kind of writing and into her storytelling, or you don't. But I do think that if you've never read any of her works, then you should. Because for me personally, I have not seen anybody write the way Clarice Lispector writes. And the more I read her works and the more I allow myself to discover what she's created with her writing, the more I can see why she's so acclaimed.